politicians who are trying to get more power for themselves or their political party without thinking about the impact on the people. We see this coming from greedy special interests. They're high-paid lobbyists coming into Washington and helping to shape policies and write laws that serve them, but that don't serve us, that serve them, but that harm our planet. As we go through many of the different challenges that we are facing, that we feel in our own families and in our own communities across this country, we can attribute the root cause of these problems back to this corruption of spirit that we see casting a dark shadow over our country. That corruption of spirit that has drawn us so far away from that vision that our founders had for this country. That vision of a government filled with leaders who are of the people, by the people, and for the people. Leaders who are elected, leaders who are there with one purpose in mind: to put service before self, to put service to the people before their own selfish interests. What gives me hope in seeing a path forward for how we create this big change that we need to make is in each and every one of you here. It is in the hearts of every American in this country who understand what this country is about, knowing that the power is within our hands to make the change that we need to see, knowing that our founders had in mind in those founding documents, those words, "we the people." Too often, Washington thinks that the power is in their hands, that they get to dictate who wins these elections, that they pick the winners and the losers. But they forget that our democracy is built on this foundation where we, the people, have the power to choose our leaders and to choose the direction that we want to take. It is when we recognize that power that we have. It is when we raise our voices. It is when we stand together, when we stand united in that spirit of aloha, that spirit of care, that we know there is no obstacle we cannot overcome. It is when we stand together in that spirit, recognizing the pain and hardship that our friends and our families are dealing with. People who are working 2, sometimes 3 jobs, barely squeaking by just to pay the rent, just to be able to pay the bills. People who are struggling every day. We recognize the hardship that is facing us with our environment, with this climate crisis that looms before us. We recognize the hardship that's being faced by people who are stuck in a broken criminal justice system, by people whose families are being torn apart, people who are suffering because of this failed war on drugs. We see so many the problem, and now we know that we are the solution. We know that when we stand together, we can pass real reform like Medicare for all.
Yeah.
To make sure that every single person is able to get care that we need and deserve. It is when we stand together that we can reform this criminal justice system, that we can pass legislation at the federal level to finally end the prohibition on marijuana.
Yes. Yeah.
When we stand together, we can make the kind of bold changes and investments that we need to see to protect our environment, to get us off of our addiction to fossil fuels and invest in a green, renewable economy. Green, renewable, infrastructure, making sure that every single person in this country has clean air to breathe, clean water to drink, and that our kids and their kids will have a future that we can live in. You know, coming from a state like Hawaii, growing up, playing in the water and hiking in the mountains, appreciating our environment was something that came naturally because it's our home. This is not a political issue. This is an issue that impacts every single one of us. That was the reason why I first got involved in politics in the first place. It was the reason why I ran for office in Hawaii at the age of 21. To try to be in a position to do something about what I saw was too few people in leadership who recognized the need for us to protect our home. Almost 15 years ago, I enlisted in the Army National Guard. I have served now for almost 15 years and deployed twice to the Middle East, where I saw firsthand the cost of war. I served in a medical unit in that first deployment to Iraq, and every single day, the very first thing I did, the very first task that I had was to go through a list of names of every American service member who was a casualty in combat in that previous 24 hours. I had to go through that list and see if there were any of soldiers from our unit who were there, who had been injured, and to make sure that they were getting the care that they needed. It was heart-wrenching because I knew that behind every one of those names was one of my fellow service members. People who had left loved ones behind to go fight in this regime change war that proved to be so costly in American lives, taking over 4,000 of our troops' lives, taking hundreds of thousands of Iraqi lives. What to speak of the cost on our veterans who came home with wounds, both visible and invisible. And a war that cost us, every single one of us, trillions of dollars. Trillions of dollars that we need to be investing in our people, that we need to make sure everyone gets health care, that we need to make sure our kids get a quality education, that we need to pay for our infrastructure. So I came back from these deployments committed and motivated to be a part of the solution, to bring about this change in our foreign policy that proved to be so costly and counterproductive in undermining our national security by strengthening terrorist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. This is why I'm running for president. Your support to serve you as your commander-in-chief, to end these costly regime change wars, to end this new Cold War that we are in, with tensions increasing between the United States and nuclear-armed countries like Russia and China. To end this nuclear arms race. It's been kicked off because President Trump withdrew from this INF treaty that 30 years ago reduced the risk of nuclear catastrophe in this country due to the leadership at that time of Reagan and Gorbachev, who sat down and made a deal. Now, instead of seeing how we can work with other countries to decrease this risk of nuclear catastrophe, to decrease the numbers of nuclear weapons in the world, right now we have a president, we have leaders in Washington, frankly, from both parties who are interested in increasing those tensions, spending more of our hard-earned taxpayer dollars on more of these nuclear weapons that are more powerful and, frankly, more likely to be used, putting us at risk and putting the world at risk. And just over a year ago in Hawaii, there was a major wake-up call when across over 1 million cell phones in our state, there was a seek shelter immediately. You remember, is today, seek shelter immediately. This is not a drill. So it was what, Linda, about 8 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday when that message came in. And if you can just imagine for a moment what that would be like. To get that message across your phone, maybe you're just waking up on a Saturday morning thinking about what you're going to do that day, and all of a sudden you have minutes to live. Minutes to live. Where do you go? Now, I started thinking about my loved ones. I was in Washington, D.C. at that time, but all of my family was in Hawaii, and I started thinking about where are they? Where could they go? Are they okay? Where will they be safe? I know that was going through the minds of people all across our state. That parents piling all their kids quickly into the car and driving to the mountains to try to see if they could find a cave. Maybe that might be the only place where they could find shelter. I heard from a father who was on Oahu and had one child on the south shore and another child on the west side of the island. It was over an hour drive apart. He has just minutes. He was wondering which of his children would he drive to spend those last minutes of his life with. It was terrifying. Now, even though that turned out to be a false alarm, the reason we reacted in the way that we did is because this threat is real. And it's not just real to the people of Hawaii. This is a threat that exists for each of us in this country. And I talk about this not just to bring up this depressing reality that we're facing. I talk about it because it doesn't have to be this way. It does not have to be this way. Power lies within our hands to change course, to bend the arc of history away from war and towards peace. This is why I'm running for president. Because I don't want any one of you, I don't want any one of your families, your friends, your loved ones to have to go through what we went through in Hawaii a year ago. No person in this country should have to live with that terrifying threat hanging over our heads. I'm running for president to serve you as commander-in-chief, to bring an end to these wasteful interventionist wars, to work to end this new Cold War, and to end this nuclear arms race and take the trillions of dollars that we are spending on these wars and bring them back here into our pockets, investing them in our people, investing them in our communities, and in our future. You know, sometimes people, they keep Tulsi, why do you talk about the cost of war so much? Why do you talk about foreign policy? That's something that's important to people somewhere else. But what about what's happening? Where you have a mother whose child is sick with a pre-existing condition and she's concerned about what happens when my child grows up. Who will take care of him? I had a conversation with a teacher in New Hampshire whose son was born with a heart problem. And she was concerned, what happens when I retire and I'm not able to work and provide that health insurance for my child? What will he do? And tears were running down her face as she's thinking about how he will fare when she's gone. As we think about the challenges that we face every single day in our lives, the things we wake up in the morning worried about, the people we wake up in the morning worried about, we can only address these issues if we take those dollars, those trillions of dollars that we are spending on these wars, and use them to serve the needs of our people. Because we know all too well, because we see it time and time again, how self-serving politicians in Washington will tell you, we just don't have enough money to make sure our teachers are paid to teach your kids. Sorry, but we just don't have enough money to make sure that people who are sick in this country and who don't have much money can get the care that they need. Sorry, but we just don't have the money to make sure that our crumbling infrastructure, whether it be our roads, our bridges, or our water, is safe and livable for us. Sorry, there's just not enough money, but the people who say those very same things are the same people who will then go and cast their vote or advocate for waging yet another wasteful regime change war. They will not think twice about the trillions of dollars that they will spend, our taxpayer dollars, on building more of these nuclear weapons that make our country and our world less safe and that undermine our well-being, that undermine our economy. This is the kind of leadership that I bring. This is why I'm running for president, to stand up to those in the foreign policy establishment, the political professional political class in Washington across both parties who have perpetuated these problems not only for years, but decades.
Yes, they have.
The only way we make this change is if we stand together, that we stand united against those forces who have benefited from these policies for far too long on the backs of everyday Americans. The obstacles are great. The challenges sometimes seem too difficult to overcome. But we only have to look to our country's history to see the path forward. How we see how people like Dr. King, through times of great hardship, made great change by leading a movement that was made up of people. We, the people, raising our voices, raising our hearts, using all that we have to build that bright future that has opportunity, equality, and justice for everyone. So I look to people like Dr. King as inspiration, especially during these dark times, especially during these times where there is so much hatred and negativity being thrown around. When people are throwing up their hands and just saying, you know what, it's just too broken. None of us can actually make a difference, no. Dr. King and leaders like him showed us how. They wrote the playbook. And he told us then, darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. That hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that.
Yes. Yeah.
So we cannot mistake love for weakness because there is nothing more powerful. There's nothing more powerful than when we, the people, stand up with care for each other, with love for our country, and a passion for our future. Nothing can stand in our path. Our opportunity, our responsibility, and our choice right now is to rise up, to change the course of our future, to reclaim our destiny, and to fulfill that vision that our founders had for us, bringing forward those principles of putting people before profits, of putting people before politics, of standing together shoulder to shoulder to fight for each other, to fight for our country and our future. This is the challenge that I'm asking you to join me in on, to stand together to build this movement of peace. Peace abroad, peace here at home, to fulfill that vision of our future that serves the people, that protects our planet, and provides that bright future for generations to come. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your support. Thank you. Thoughts or concerns that you have on the top of your mind today? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for tuning in to Real Progressives. We're currently live in Las Vegas, where Tulsi Gabbard is hosting a town hall, and she's taking questions from the audience.
I think that I knew nothing about you when I came here, and I think I got a pretty good view of what you stand for. How are you going to set forth your platform to accomplish this? That's my first question. Secondly, one thing you didn't address, and it's important to me, I adopted a child from Romania many, many years ago after communism fell, and a child from foster care. They were both in care for 2.5 years. I saw what being separated from a parent, from someone you can rely on, can do to children. What will you do about the children on the border? Thank you.
Thank you. A I'll start with your second question first, because I know this is something that's weighing on all of our hearts as we see how families are being torn apart and how there are still hundreds of children today who were separated from their parents, and where this administration has no idea where to find them and how to bring these families back together. I haven't been through the experience you've been through. It's unimaginable to begin to think of what that is like, either as a parent or as a child. Look, this speaks to a few very deep-seated problems. Obviously, we have to pass serious and comprehensive immigration reform in this country.
Yeah.
To address a whole host of problems, this being at the forefront of them. Obviously, this immigration reform has to deal with people like the dreamers who are still here in this country and facing every day the concern and uncertainty of being deported to another country that they've never known, leaving behind the only homes and family and friends that they have ever known, dealing with the fact that we have veterans in this country who put their lives on the line and who are being deported. There are so many of these issues that we have to face. I think we need now, not waiting until 2020, we need to continue to pursue legal action to do all that we can to reunite these children with their families. We've got to make sure that we're dedicating the resources we need to the border so that those who are seeking asylum are able to receive that welcome and working through the process that we have in place for those who are seeking asylum. I think the deeper-seated issue is not recognizing the humanity of those who are being impacted by these policies. To me, that speaks to this corruption of spirit that I started our conversation with. It impacts so many of these different issues that we face, that unless we start there, we can pass different laws, but we won't actually fix the heart of the problem. To your first question about how to bring my platform forward, there are no other candidates running for president who are raising these issues that I'm raising and bringing forward solutions, nor are there any other candidates who have the experience that I have of serving in the Army 15 years, of being deployed twice to the Middle East, of serving in Congress now for over 6 years on both the Armed Services and Foreign Affairs committees, bringing that experience forward to fill that most important job that a president has, which is to serve as Commander-in-Chief. These are the qualifications and experience that I bring to the forefront, and the message that I bring about how we solve these problems that we're facing. So the how we are doing that is coming into rooms like this, all across the country, and using every platform possible to continue to introduce myself and get that message out there. And the amazing thing is that may not be so surprising to us, but is surprising to some in Washington who are so out of touch with the reality of our lives every day, is that this is a message that resonates with people regardless of political party or affiliation or ideology. Because these are issues that impact every single one of us in this country, whether you're Democrat, Independent, Republican, Libertarian, whatever it is. The vast majority of people in this country have seen the destructive nature of our failed foreign policy and how much we have spent on these wars, and want to see real leadership that will make that sea change in our foreign policy that we need to see. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lori. I'm a member of the LGBTQ community, so I want to thank you for always voting for equality. You've been a strong ally, and I have so much respect for you in that regard. My question is, you are facing all the big money lobby groups. You're going up against the military-industrial complex. You're going up against big pharma, health insurance companies, all of that. So what are your ideas on, when, the next session comes in, what can we do to eliminate that type of corporate lobbying that's going on and basically legalize bribery that we have here in the United States?
This is such an important issue. Thank you. I think the first place we've got to start is stopping PAC and lobbyist contributions. to members of Congress.
Yeah.
I think there's a way that we can do that as voters. We've already seen just in the last couple of years how different polls have shown that getting rid of this corruptive influence of money in our politics is a top of mind issue for Americans in this country. Because we see every day how those with the money are changing the laws that work for them and leaving the rest of us behind. So just in the last few years, in the last election in particular, I think there were more candidates than ever before who were running for Congress on that platform saying, I will not take any PAC or lobbyist contributions. A lot of them got elected. So already we're starting to see the shift in Washington. And the interesting thing is, again, that won't be surprising, is the powers that be in Washington are trying to get those members of Congress to go back on their promise to their constituents and take PAC and lobbyist money. So this corruptive influence is real and it's happening in broad daylight. We are seeing the impacts of it in our healthcare, in foreign policy, in education, in criminal justice, stopping that real change from happening. This is one of the central things that we have to change. And it's a tough mountain to climb, but it is the one that is at the center of all of these other problems. I think when we see how many people are now publicly supporting legislation like Medicare for All, even with the opposition of big insurance and big pharma, we see how change is possible when we raise our voices and we hold leaders accountable and challenge them on whose interests they are serving. Is it the lobbyists that they have breakfast with in the morning, or is it the people that they come home to and who voted for them to serve them? This is something that we've got to change now, and we can't afford to wait.
Amen. Tulsi, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your service. I don't really have a lot of questions. I've been following on social media all of your different speeches as you go around. But I did also want to thank you. Back in 2016, we didn't know what you knew yet. We learned really fast about how the party system is working and treating candidates and standing up for the truth. But I also want to in my view, the political revolution started with you.
Yes. Right on.
Basically, tell the DNC this is not cool. And that inspired, I just wanted to say, as I walked around, a lot of people are giving you the shirts off their back. So the Nevada Progressive Coalition wanted to give you a shirt off our back. I don't know anybody that could handle what keeps getting thrown at them with as much grace as you are doing. So thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. When you talk about all the stuff that gets thrown at us, and yes, we're the targets of a lot of these attacks and smear attempts, and people who are coming from these industries that are threatened, trying to undermine our campaign. People say, gosh, you know, stay pretty cool and calm and collected. It's not hard to do when you know what you're fighting for.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not hard to do when there is nothing they have that I want. It is not hard to do when I know exactly who I'm offering to serve. I'm not in this campaign because I have some lifelong ambition to be president. I don't. I never have. I'm doing this, and I have a laser-like focus on my mission because I see what is wrong with the leadership in this country that has existed. It exists now and has existed long before 2016. I want to lead that change. to bring about that sea change in our policies that brings it back focused on putting service before self. This is what's in my heart. This is what's at the heart of every soldier, every service member, every one of us who raised our hand. That I'm willing to give my life for our people and for our country. That's what I bring to the White House, that principle and that heart of service before self, and bringing back those values of respect and honor and integrity to the presidency, so that our White House can once again be a beacon of light.
Yeah.
A beacon of hope.
Aloha.
Aloha.
I'm fanboying right now. But wow.
What's your name?
I'm Carter James.
Nice to meet you,
So,
Carter James.
The honor's all mine. My question concerns the social fabric of our culture. The founding people and the founding fathers warned us, as Benjamin Franklin so famously said, in order for us to keep the republic, there would have to be the practice of both public and private morality, both public and private virtues. And in my opinion, we're living in a culture today where those things are feared, unpracticed, and not tolerated. So my question to you, Madam President, if you're so fortunate to be our Commander-in-Chief, what will you do to encourage we the people to have a better decorum? Because, quite frankly, I'm not liking the way how we the people are so ugly towards each other right now.
Thank you. I mean, it starts with leadership, setting that tone and providing that example. That when faced with hate, not responding with hate, but with love. It starts with aloha, the way we started our conversation today. Because what aloha really is, it's so much more than hello and goodbye. What aloha really is that expression of love, that expression of respect and care and compassion, and recognizing that no matter where we come from, no matter the color of our skin or who we love or how we worship or any of these things that are so often used to divide us, that are used to foment that hateful language, that negative rhetoric, that bigotry that too often turns into violence. And reminds us that we are all God's children. We are all connected. And share that breath of eternal life, as Danny said. This is such an important question because it is a problem that exists within the leaders of our country that should be setting the example. But it is also a challenge that each of us has to face because we face difficult situations, maybe in our own lives, sometimes within our own families, friends, co-workers, or everyday interactions, where you see somebody who may have a different view or a different perspective, or may be filled with hate. And so it's our choice every day to shift that culture within our society of how do we respond. Because people watch and people react. A friend of ours in Hawaii just sent my husband a message the other day, and she said, I want you to pass this on to Tulsi. She said, I was driving down this street, and there was a guy who had his truck pulled over, and he had a big Trump sign on his truck, and he was waving. We do a lot of sign waving in Hawaii. And she had her Tulsi 2020 sticker on her car, and I don't know what, he said something that wasn't so nice. And in that moment, she thought, man, I really want to kind of flip something as I'm driving by. But she stopped for a moment. She said, what would Tulsi do? And so she smiled, and she waved, and she said, aloha. And what did he do? He smiled, and he waved back and gave her a thumbs up. The big things. Now, maybe she didn't completely change his mind so he would vote for Tulsi instead of Trump in that moment. But I tell you what, there's an opening. There's an opening. And the more we treat each other with respect, even when, and maybe especially when, we disagree or when we come from different places during those moments of toughness and hardship, that's where we have the real opportunity to make the big change, to connect with each other heart to heart. And say, yeah, we might disagree on 9 out of 10 things, but that one thing, man, there's opportunity. That is how we change this country. That's how we change that culture within our society.
Thank you.
My name is Lou Baker. I'm here quite by accident.
I'm glad you're here, Lou.
Well, I hope so. I have 2 questions. Number one, this is a big issue, and it's the border. And so what is your opinion on the border? But more importantly, are you open to other suggestions other than a fence? Would you be willing to work with Mexico in what would be a joint effort that would be beneficial to both sides of the border?
Yeah, great question.
Solar panels.
Here's the problem with what's happening at the border today, and frankly, this is not just what's happening today, it's been happening for a long time, is we end up reacting to situations. Whether we have kind of an ongoing number of people who are coming and seeking to cross the border, you have large numbers coming in waves at different times, as we have at different times in our past. The problem is that we end up reacting rather than trying to see how do we solve kind of the root cause of the problem. And so dealing with border security itself, we have to have secure borders. If we don't have secure borders, we don't really have a country. We have to look at what are the best ways to do that. A wall from sea to shining sea is not the answer. We have technology, we have creativity and ingenuity and innovation in this country, and we got to bring the best of what we have to say, okay, what's the best way that we can secure our border? And that's the best use of our taxpayer dollars to do so. Again, we've got to provide the resources needed to those who are working at the border, not just border security, but the judges and the administrators and the other folks who are working at the border. And we have to build relationships based on cooperation rather than conflict. Yes, with Mexico, but what about these other countries in Central and South America where people are fleeing, making that arduous journey, people suffering and dying along the way? How about we address the root cause of those problems and see how we build partnerships? Yes, with the leaders of those countries, but also seeing how we can help empower people to make it so they don't have to feel that their only chance for life and opportunity is to flee their homes. I want to tie this all back to something I talked about earlier. As we talk about the cost of war, and we look at the long-standing negative impacts of the U.S. interventionist and regime change policies. If you go back a few decades and you see how the United States government intervened and influenced and toppled dictators they didn't like in countries in Central and South America, you are still seeing the after effects, the negative after effects of those interventions. So the cost of war includes the things that I talked about, but in Central and South America, across the Middle East, we are continuing to see how the people in the countries where we have waged these wars continue to suffer as a result.
So my question is a little bit tricky to say. I'm just going to say it. I don't mean to be offensive to say it though. But I'm just afraid of the military. And I feel like it's a really unpopular thing to say. When you talk about your experience in the military and sort of the legacy of honor that you've internalized and sort of decided that that's going to be your mode of service, I mean, that's definitely something that I love and I can get behind. But as a huge organization, the U.S. military, that's like, I mean, it's like bigger than a country in a lot of cases. What can you do to reduce that? And what interests are you up against that will be pushing against you to, sort of, as you're talking about ending conflict and ending our intervention, how does that even work? is it possible?
Thank you. Thank you. It's an important question. I'm glad that you asked it. We have a civilian-led military for a reason. This is obviously important for our democracy, that we don't end up in a situation like other countries in the world where you have militaries who make the decisions for the people in the country and obviously have the weapons and the forces to enforce those laws. That is not what we have. I don't remember what country it was exactly, but one of the first had some visitors from a military from another country. I wish I could remember what it was, but I remember being surprised when I shared with them that I served in the Army National Guard, and I talked to them about how a civilian-led military works, and they were shocked. You mean the military's not in charge? The generals are not in charge? So what that means in answering your question is, there are so many people I've had the privilege of serving with, to know, who embody these values and this spirit of service before self, who, especially in this post-Vietnam era, in this post-9/11 era, people who raise their hands volunteering to die for our country. The ultimate act of selflessness. What's at issue with the concerns you raise are the same as the concerns I raise, which is the policymakers, the leaders, the presidents, the cabinet surrounding the presidents, United States House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate, the people who are the ones making decisions about where our troops are sent into combat, about the missions they are sent on to go and topple dictators in countries we don't like, while hypocritically sending our troops to support countries like Saudi Arabia, who are waging a genocidal war in Yemen, killing tens of thousands of Yemeni civilians and causing millions more to suffer. This is why I'm running for president and not trying to become a four-star general, because this is where we have to make that change. We're up against the military-industrial complex. We're up against the foreign policy establishment in Washington that is made up of people in the media, people in think tanks, elected officials, essentially people who have built their entire this failed, wasteful, we must be the world's police foreign policy. So we're up against some tough forces, and they're not going to go quietly or easily. But I know without a shadow of a doubt that if we the people make the choice to make that change, that we can and will be successful. We have to. We have to, because there is so much at stake for us and our lives, our communities, and our future. What to speak of the impact that these wasteful and destructive policies are having on the world. We can make a huge change for our future and for the planet, for peace. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. That's why I'm running. That's what I'm committed to. Thank you very much. Thank you. I know we don't have time to get to all of yours if you like, and chat for just a second.
Thank you. Aloha to Tulsi. One more time. Aloha.
Aloha!
So you're currently watching Real Progressives, and we're live on location in Las Vegas. Tulsi Gabbard just wrapped up her town hall. It's been about 60 to 100 people here. I'm going to pan on back.
Two-thirds of the way. Let's go. Let's do it.
Again, be sure to like Real Progressives, follow us, share. Tune in, get involved, get engaged, whether it's through activism, whether it's learning modern monetary theory, learning more policy, if you want to be a policy wonk. Real Progressives offers many insightful information on all of these topics that are near and dear to the left agenda and the progressive agenda and the American agenda. Again, thank you for coming out here, for watching, and be sure to share. Tune into Mac and Cheese with Stephen Grumbine. Tune into the Savage Joy Show on Real Progressives. And when another candidate comes to Las Vegas, we'll be live streaming as well. This is Manuel Arizala with Real Progressives. We're signing off, and people are lining up to take photos with candidate Tulsi Gabbard here. Let's see if we can.
Excuse me? What's the Wi-Fi?
You gotta go after the root cause. What do you think that root cause is? Can you elaborate?
Our broken immigration system, lack of resources, and lack of building relationships based on cooperation rather than conflict with other countries that we need to be working on to deal with why people are trying to come and seek asylum and seek refuge and opportunity in our country in the first place.
And do you have ideas of root causes in those countries that we need to tackle?
Well, I mean, every country is facing different problems, whether it's poverty or corruption or criminal gangs. I think every country has perhaps a different set of problems. We can't simply continue to sit in a reactive posture rather than seeking proactively. How can we, along with other countries and leaders, be a part of the solution? I'm the only candidate that is speaking out on ending these wasteful regime change wars and that is costing us, the American people, so much. Bringing those trillions of dollars back to serve the needs of people in our communities and addressing issues like healthcare for all, like education and infrastructure. Of all the different candidates running, I'm uniquely qualified to serve as Commander-in-Chief because of my experience, serving almost 15 years as a soldier in the Army National Guard, deploying twice to the Middle East, serving for years in Congress on the Armed Services and Foreign Affairs committees to bring that leadership to the forefront to make the change that we need to see from day one.
I've had the phone with you for a second.
Where do you stand?
The second.
Background checks?
Yeah, absolutely. I support universal background checks. I have throughout my time in Congress and voted for the legislation that we recently passed in the House of Representatives to provide for universal background checks. That legislation now sits with the Senate, and we're encouraging folks to call their senators and to try to get that legislation through into the President's desk.
One more question.
Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, I'm Manny with Real Progressives, and you're on live. And currently we champion modern monetary theory. Dr. Stephanie Kelton, who was previously Bernie Sanders' 2016 economic advisor, has championed that. Is that something that you're open to? Are you aware of that?
It's something that I've heard about. I'm looking at what my economic policy and tax policy will be, and we'll be releasing that through our campaign soon.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate it.
So Real Progressives got that last question in.
Thank you. We'll see you later.
And again, be sure to like, follow, share.
Thank you, Tulsi.
Real Progressives. And we're going to be signing off here. Again, Manuel Arizala live in Las Vegas at the Asian Cultural Center, where Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard addressed a local crowd here at the town hall. And again, be sure to like, share, follow Real Progressives, and tune into Steve Grumbine with Mac and Cheese and the Savage Joy Show. Again, finally, okay, this is it, folks. I'm actually going to sign off now.